Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. So with undue delay, it is time we return to our top ranking videos, and it is time to look at the best skill class champions. Now I know quite a few are kind of tired of the mandatory disclaimers, however, regardless of how many times I actually make them, there are still some comments that seem to completely skip past them. But either way, these rankings are a mixture of my own personal thoughts and current game relevance and trends. Additionally, they primarily prioritize, well, competitive play. Effectively, champions who we use when losing matters. Champions who you will find in Celestial 5 decks, champions who you will find in Tier 1 wars. And there is a very good reason for it, because even though not everybody is reaching for that and not everybody is aiming for that, those are effectively the best and most efficient tactics available. They have their own little ecosystem, so to speak. However, every single one of these champions, aside from the ones that are there exclusively for defense, effectively are also amazing for just everywhere else in the game. So if the champion does have offensive uses, if he works in battlegrounds, he will work in story quests, he will work in incursions, he will work in just about everywhere else. And ultimately, what gives champions value? In my opinion, champions gain value by being able to provide for you further resources, by being able to yield you wins when winning is not guaranteed. You are always guaranteed to be able to finish a quest eventually, when you have highly enough ranked champions, or if you have enough revives or something like that. You're never guaranteed to win an alliance, or you're never guaranteed to win battlegrounds match. And that is when we use the most efficient champions. And those are the ones that are ranked here. So we're going to be ranking the skill class. And the skill class is still effectively in the last place, in my personal opinion, even though it is in significantly better shape than it was like 6 months ago. As we can see by this list, and again, fair few amount of people kind of disagreed with me by placing Korg, Attuma and Killmonger up as high as I did at the time. I felt it was justified because, again, those were the most present, used, and ranked skill champions in the game at the time. Now, the scene has changed quite drastically because not only there are some champions released as 7 stars that were not before, not only we have some reworks that are relevant, not only there are some new champions released that are effectively definitely in this top 10. Additionally, new champion releases in other classes have significantly impacted this ranking as well. And we're going to discuss that in a moment. But first, let us go and give us some honorable shoutouts that did not quite make the list this time around. Like Black Cat. Black Cat's one of the champions I always love to use. Feels very enjoyable, but I don't think she quite makes that top 10. I do think she has plenty of versatility. I do think she is fairly unique and definitely, again, very enjoyable. I just don't think she is quite up there in the top 10 meta skill champions. Similar to Shield. Shield is a champion that I have always described as solid, as good. She has never been bad. She has never been top, in my opinion. She has always had her places in the game. There are some people, obviously, who are more enthusiastic about Shield than others, as with any other champion. But ultimately, in the right set of circumstances, she can be good, she can be viable, but she's not the type of champion that we're going to see, as a mainstay for majority of the players. However, still a very, very good champion, in my opinion. Another champ, well, a couple more shoutouts before we head further. And one of them have to go to Moleman. Moleman is not currently a relevant meta champion, as much as it pains me so, because I like the champion. I actually use Moleman daily. I do have a rank 3 Moleman, and I do use him a ton for Alliance Quest, because he kind of fits my lanes and my needs, especially in the off seasons when I'm running recall masteries. But ultimately, he's not up there anymore for sure. And then we also do have Massacre. Sakura used to be one of the top skill attackers, in my opinion. He's not one right now. And that is kind of entirely dictated by the current meta. It's just less and less of the meta defenders actually get countered by him. And then, still, it is worth pointing out that skill class is still one of the classes that suffer the most for not having champions released as 7 stars. There's several champions that could have potential in the top 10 of skill class just do not exist. And I think that number is higher still than just about any other class in the game. Like, we did get Nick Fury as 7-star, which is a huge help, but we still don't have Valkyrie, which, you know, could be relevant, would see at this type of game. We don't have Stealth Suit Spider-Man, which was, you know, a very popular champion before the 6 stars were kind of phased out. So Stealth Suit Spider-Man obviously is not in this ranking. Kate, you know, recent invade meta aside, you know, Kate is one of the top skill champions in the game, if not the top skill champion in the game, but she doesn't exist as a 7-star, so we're not ranking her. And similar to Kingpin as well. It'd be interesting where a 7-star Kingpin fits in the game, but we can't find that out because he does not exist as a 7-star. Then there's still Baron Zemo, who could potentially make splash as well. There's like 4 to 5 skill champions that could easily be in the top 10. That is more than any other class. If you look at any other class, they have like 2, 3. And that is still holding skill class back, which is ultimately one of the reasons why skill is at the last place right now. But spot number 10, I'm giving to Hitmonkey. Hitmonkey, honestly, I'm a bit disappointed. It's not necessarily on his own performance, but it's more so I expected him to make a bigger splash when he came out as a 7-star. Granted, he is still in the Titan crystals, therefore he's not available to, you know, a vast majority of the players, because, you know, Titan crystals are not that easy to come by, especially if you're free-to-play player or not high-spending player. But I did expect to see bigger impact on him. I do see, you know, some rank 4s, some rank 3s in people's decks on occasion. But ultimately, I guess that goes down to the, you know, matchups that he does not counter. Science class not being, you know, defensively the most dominant to begin with. Him not necessarily being the best skill counter to those science threats that exist. And him being a bit squishy and health mattering as much. Ultimately, still an absolute nuke of the champion. Still definitely very capable. Whenever I do see a rank 4 Hitmonkey in front of me, you know, my first instinct is always to try and ban it and get rid of it. But again, it is impossible to say that Hitmonkey is currently kind of like breaking the meta bank. However, you definitely do see him around. There are people who have invested in him more than others. But, you know, as for me currently, because there are just so many champions that I want rank up, Hitmonkey is sitting at rank 1 for me. You know, I do plan on taking him up, but he's not the first priority, which in my opinion is a fairly apt description for a champion that ranks in towards the bottom of the top 10 in any respective class. Those are typically the champions that you kind of want to rank up, but they're not your first priorities for sure. And overall, though, I still think he has aged well. I do think he still has a great amount of damage. He can be very, very fast. And I do look forward to see how he's going to move up the meta ladder in future. Now, spot number 9 is going to be a split spot. And it's going to be a split spot in between Korg and Attuma. And that's another thing. That is how low I think these champions have fallen. And part of the reason for that is indirectly Bullseye, realistically speaking. Because if you look at the skill class, Bullseye, Killmonger, and Korg were the biggest casualties in the mutant, so to speak, glow-up. And most of the mutant glow-up includes ability to counter Bullseye, obviously, for instance, Negasonic. However, they are made in a way that completely annihilate Attuma and Korg as well. And they are just catching strays left, right, and center. So we have like Negasonic that completely destroy all of those. Obviously, Onslaught, one of the most popular champions in the game, like a complete counter to them. And then, you know, we have Dazzler that's doing great in the game. Again, Dazzler completely countering Attuma and the Bullseye. And now we have Jean Grey. And it is very hard for Korg and Attuma to do as well as they used to. I think Attuma is aging better than Korg. I think Attuma is currently still more present and more relevant. And if I had to pick in between the two, right now, I would definitely pick Attuma, in my opinion. But overall, I think they're in fairly similar place in the game, where Attuma can be nuked by just about anybody with like a moderate health loss, which also has, you know, plenty of counters. And if you do have counters, then Attuma is about as vanilla fight as you can get. But he's kind of scary as rank 4. And Korg, Korg can be fought with the vast majority of the champions in game, but the reason why he was still valuable as a defender was that even if opponents had a fairly good counter to Korg, the fight used to still take a while. Now it doesn't so much anymore with Onslaughts, with Jean Greys, with Dazzlers. He's just yet another thing that can be nuked if you do have a counter, albeit the fight is more difficult. And, you know, in some of the metas, Korg is obviously significantly more valuable, like recently we had in the Wade meta. But overall, I do feel like largely because Bullseye is the champion, and Kabam's actively trying to create and sell counters to Bullseye, primarily, these guys are kind of getting the worst of it. And unlike Bullseye, they're not as punishing when you make a mistake. Unlike Bullseye, you know, overall they're worse offensively. Like Bullseye still has some offensive matchups that he can do. Korg and Attuma, not as much. So I do think they're both splitting the 9th spot right now because they're fairly similar in a sense that, you know, they are defender that at this point works more than like try and draft them late and catch opponent without a counter. But even then, they're not as effective at, you know, stopping the opponent dead in the tracks as the new edge defenders like Zola, Yelena, or Serpent, or what have you. So there's still place for them in the game, but it's definitely shrinking and definitely a lot smaller. All right, moving on to the spot number 8, and that's Black Panther Silver. And again, it is a bit difficult to rank him accurately because he's still somewhat rare champion because he was part of the banquet event, he was Glorious Guardians, not everybody has him, and if you do have him, he also requires a SIG investment and an awakening and all that stuff. So not too many people are willing to make that leap of faith. However, he is definitely one of those guys that I see as a rank 4, and people are doing some insane things with him, and ultimately, when he works, he can be an amazing nuke for the game. One thing that does give him additional value right now in the game, I think, is also Yelena matchup. He's one of the better counters for Yelena, and there are not too many champs that can nuke her. And overall, again, whichever matchup he can take as well, he's moderately decent on defense as well. He can kind of catch you with that level 1 animation, or if you accidentally parry stand him, can be a bit annoying to kill. If he gets through his level 1s, he gets those cleanse charges. So he certainly does have uses. He's not everybody's cup of tea though, and I do believe if he was like wildly more available, or if we had these Glorious Guardians, or, you know, some more awakening gems that we can use and some 6 stones, then he would be way more popular than he is right now. Because with many of the people, you know, you still have, well, you either do not have all the Glorious Guardians champions, or at the very least, you kind of had to pick one in which you know, awakened and invested, and then the rest of them, you know, are left unawakened, and he does quite need that awakened ability. But I do have quite a bit of faith in him, and I definitely see value in it. When I see people who have invested in him, I do always respect that champion and what he can do in the game. So this is, you know, a bit of a promotional material, perhaps, but I have seen him do some crazy things, is all that I'm saying. And I do believe that once he's more widely available, more people would actually end up using him. Right, so that is for spot number 8. Spot number 7. It's Mantis. Mantis again, fairly unique skill champion, and let's not pretend. He's not the most versatile, not the most widely used. There are very specific things that people do with Mantis, typically. And that is, you know, counter Photon or a handful of other science champions, or nuke some relatively more vanilla matchups. And that's what she does. And that's what's needed in the game at the same time. Because, you know, she is one of the best at what she does. For instance, against Photon, I would say she's probably the best Photon counter. I value her more over Crossbones as well, even, because the fight is safer, the fight is easier, the fight's kind of like more controlled. And that's what it. She is one of the stable skill attackers. I don't like her. I don't like the playstyle. Not a massive fan of Mantis, but she's relevant, and people do use her. And, you know, she can take fairly mid amount of fights, comparatively speaking to more versatile attackers. But whatever she does take, she is quite fast. And again, she does it very, very well, especially against like a staple champion like Photon again, who is, I think, one of the top 5 most used champions in the game right now. So she does have a place in the game. I'm not a massive fan of her, however. Okay, don't want to talk too much about her. I want to talk about a lot more about the next champion. The next champion is Lumatrix. Now, I initially wasn't like a massive fan of Lumatrix. However, he has definitely grown on me over time. I do think he's quite awesome. He does have a fair amount of defensive value as well, because he can be quite dangerous and punching as well, because with that split power bar, you're never quite sure which special attack he's going to use. And then whenever he throws specials, you can't really punish them, and that can be significant for some champion abilities and nodes. And, you know, if you do get cornered against him, you know, it's kind of game over. And yes, he has defensive value. But offensively, he also feels like fairly unique. He even to a degree feels like a, you know, alternate reality version of a skill ghost, if you will. Because there's a lot of phasing involved, there's a large amount of aggression involved, there's big yellow numbers, and it's kind of straightforward. That's what he does. He gets a lot of crits. Eventually they turn into guaranteed crits, so he can bypass a lot of things. And that also kind of enables him to do a lot of random matchups. Like with Lumatrix, you can go into tech class and, you know, you can take out Sentinels with Lumatrix. That's, you know, in my opinion, quite cool. You can use Lumatrix against Red Skull quite easily and nuke him down, which, again, I think is fairly, you know, cool and interesting. And I'm sure there are, like, more random champions that we can use Lumatrix against, like, what have you. And then you can use Lumatrix against some mutants even. For instance, I'm personally quite confident and find him quite convenient against Dust. There's no good reason not to use him against Dust. And yeah, you can kind of go around the class wheel. Obviously, he's quite good in Photon. It is a bit finicky, but he's definitely capable of doing that fight. Then you can quite easily use him against, let's say, Sasquatch and a handful of Mystic champions. So he's kind of an opposite of Mantis. He's not necessarily the fastest because he does involve a ramp-up process, but he does have a very wide amount of matchups that he can do. So I like him. I plan on, you know, getting better with him, because you do really need to get comfortable with using Lumatrix, because, you know, if you want to be capable with this champion, you need to become confident in his kits and abilities and understand them fully, like when to evade, when to not, when to push, and how the specials work, and so on and so forth. He's not like the hardest champion to learn to use, but you do really need to get comfortable with him, similar to Prowler in my opinion. But what I also like about him, he's fairly straightforward. Like, he has his endurances that reduces the non-damaging debuff duration on him. He has his phase and evade, and he has his tracking that you can rely on against non-mutants. And other than that, big yellow numbers. Another cool thing that I do like about him is that you can kind of mess around with his rotations and the way you use him and the way you ramp him. He has his standard, you know, build up to level 3, level 1, level 2. You can kind of shorten it. You can kind of push your luck with it. Because even with like a single Fury without getting the max benefit from level 2, he already starts hitting hard because of the guaranteed crits. And there are several different ways you can kind of mess around with Lumatrix to make him work for you in specific matchups. I do like that a lot, and I value that a lot. And I think he kind of justifies the spot here. It's only a shame that, you know, you couldn't really get him for free. You had to kind of pay $40 unless you're finishing C5 and stuff. But all that said, he's very, very cool. I like him a lot, and I think he's valuable. All right, let's move on to the next one, Okoye. And some people will be shocked that Okoye plays this low, but I do think she, like, here's the thing. I like Okoye, one of my most wanted champions in the game. But as I was using my 6-star Okoye, or as I was letting opponents keep their Okoyes in like battlegrounds and a bunch of other places, I noticed that Okoye also has a fairly set amount of matchups. It's not like as bad as Mantis or anything, but you could work around Okoye. Her damage is insane. Like, if she works, she's crazy good. She does have very simple playstyle, which is another reason why I love her so much. You can effectively just hit opponent, drop a level 2, they will die. If after level 2 you can weave in a heavy attack, perfect, significant damage boost. And straightforward to use, and a crazy amount of damage. And, the fact that she doesn't rely on a single debuff as a source of her damage. Love that. And that evade and snare that she has on her decks. Such a great ability. All at the same time, though, I do think every single champion that's above Okoye has a reason to be there. And maybe, that's going to change in the future. But as things stand right now, with the amount of bug fixes that she has had, obviously, this is where I feel Okoye belongs. I don't want to overhype her. I really like the champion. I use her. I rate her, in my opinion, appropriately. She is good, but not always. No champion is, but what I'm trying to go with that, there will be obviously plenty of metas when she's not particularly great, or there will be plenty of situations where she's, to me, what I notice for sure is that she's not like an auto draft option when you see her. She has place, she has things that she does very well, perhaps the best in the game, but she definitely has her limitations as well. And that's why, for now, I'm placing Okoye here. I do love her though. I also love her impact on the rest of the game. She's like one of my favorite AQ champions for when I'm not running recalls, just because how easily she stops evade and how fast she is. Obviously, Okoye lock is going away, and that is very, very good. But that was another filthy thing, allowing her to take a handful of other matchups that she otherwise wouldn't be able to. But she's quite unique, and I think a fantastic addition to the game. So who's above Okoye? We have 4 champions above. And this guy, I think Crossbones is the best pure skill attacker in the game. Skill offensive champion. Because he can do some crazy things that, break the class wheel as well. You do need to be, again, very confident and comfortable using the champion. Not many people are. But, again, everything that is currently relevant or a threat in the science class is destroyed by Crossbones. You can't say the same thing about Mantis. You can't say the same thing about Okoye, and so forth, because, Spider-Ham, no problem. Then we have Thing, no problem. Do we have Spider-Woman? It is a fairly technical match, but she can do that. He can do that for sure as well. Photon, he's probably the fastest photon counter. So anything science class, and science class is not the most defensively, relevant, he destroys. So the chances are, if you can pick one skill champion to counter most amount of science threats, Crossbones is your answer. But then, the fact that we're using Crossbones against random mystics like, Rintra, crazy. But that fight's perfectly doable, and he's very, very good about it. He's, perfectly capable of handling a series of Mystic Defenders, even though Mystic Dispersions exist, which is like the most mind-blowing thing to me. And then he's capable of going against the class wheel, for instance. Havoc's still relevant defender in some metas. He can absolutely rinse Havoc, he can absolutely rinse Bishop, even though both of them have mechanics designed specifically to punish skill champions who shrug off, because you can kind of prevent that with the build accuracy reduction on his hits. He's one of the best gentle counters, and gentle is a relevant defender. Go figure, right? But he's very, very good for that fight. And Jean Grey, he can do very, very well against Jean Grey as well. Where is she? I've seen Jean Greys get nuked by Crossbones like 40-some seconds. Quite wild to me, in my opinion. And that's going against the class wheel. Then obviously looking, at different classes, he can do a handful of matchups there as well without that much of an issue. Tech class is actually kind of one of his weakest classes, but he can attack his own champs too. So I do think he deserves it. I generally do. Like, yeah, he's also like a fairly decent Thanos counter, for example. And yeah, offensively, strictly speaking, I do think Crossbones is the best skill attacker if you are capable with Crossbones. Right. Let's move on something new. Right now, Yelena. Now, Yelena is showing kind of like a bit of mixed bag results. Obviously, it is undeniable that she's a very significant and relevant defensive threat. That is a fact. There's nothing and no one immune to reversal. Does a great job stalling the fights in vast majority of the cases. And unless you effectively dispatch her quickly enough, she's going to make your life a hell. At the same time, she's in a bit different situation, realistically, like Serpent and Bullseye was upon her release, because there are already more natural counters to her than, let's say, Serpent was. So I do not rate her, even at her peak, the same level of a defender. She's not a Serpent, realistically. Because, we do have Onslaught, who rinses her Deadpool X-Force, like the fastest option. Then we have Black Panther CW, who's crazy good against her as well. Mr. Sinister does the fight just fine as well. And, Gallon, who's decent. Jean Grey can do fine here too. So we do have counters and options. So she's not like an auto-win type of champion, even upon her release or shortly thereafter. At the same time, she definitely has to be respected. She shuts out a very significant portion of the player base. The champion base. And she does her job. But the difference again here is that if you do have a good counter, she will go down, and the fight isn't like that hard. It's not super hard to manage. Just learn to dex her level 1. Eventually, I'm sure most of us will learn how to dex the level 2 consistently, and then it's gonna be even easier. At the same time, she does have some offensive use. I do not think she's offensively an amazing champion, but she's nowhere near like the level of Enchantress. She does have some cool interactions. Again, in Invade meta, she was amazing, obviously. But in general, once you do ramp her, she can do some matchups again. But she's built in a way that, again, would kind of like focus on science class and science threats. And science isn't the most threatening class, and she's like not a go-to option for any of those fights. But currently, she, is a showstopper. She is one of the most desirable champions in the game. One of the most ranked champions in the game, partially because of the prestige as well. But I do think she deserves to be here. I do think at the moment she's one of the most valuable, used, and relevant skill champions. Again, I don't think it is anywhere near to the level of dominance on defense as Serpent was. But combining her abilities with like incoming defensive threats from nodes, it's a filthy business. It is a filthy business. She's, again, one of those champions you definitely do notice on the board immediately. So who are the two champions above Yelena? I'm still going to put on Bullseye. And I think I have a very good argument for that. And here I'm going to hear that it's like, Bullseye has way more counters than Yelena does. Absolutely. I agree with that. But I don't think anybody can deny that Bullseye is still managing to be an absolute menace. Obviously, he's a bit more relevant on the nodes. But overall, you see this guy and you use this guy and you fight against this guy everywhere, all the time, non-stop. And everybody who has a Bullseye ranks up a Bullseye. Everybody, who has a ranked up Bullseye uses a ranked up Bullseye. And yeah, despite Kabam having released, all the mutants that do counter him, again, not all of them counter him so amazingly. That's another thing. For instance, Gentle is made effectively to counter Bullseye, but he still typically takes some chip damage. And we have Dazzler that kind of destroys the skill class, but Dazzler's not that great against Bullseye, and you need super high sig level and very good level of skill to manage that fight well. And he's still the more relevant and more dangerous threat, and because a simple mistake against him can also be very punishing. There are many different interactions that make him borderline unfair defender. And one of the sleeper things about him, which maybe Yelena will prove in the game as well, but the thing that the reason why I have Bullseye above Yelena, and that is, not taking in consideration how pesky and relevant he has somehow managed to remain on defense, is very simple. Unwittingly, situationally, time and time again, is also one of the offensive MVPs. And people will think that this is like the recency bias because of the Invade meta and him being like the fastest attacker in the Invade meta. It's not. It's more so relevance and play of his track record. Like any meta that modifies attack or any nodes that modify your attack and damage turn this guy into an absolute beast and a monster on attack. And that is, partially due to his crits and crits through block, and then added, instant bleed damage that unlocks another set of nodes. It's partially due to his innate ability just to completely ignore miss, and then very easy access to evade counters, access to passive stun. He somehow, time and time again, manages to be one of the best offensive answers to a whole lot of problems everywhere in the game. Like when we had these epoch fights, for instance, he was amazing for a whole bunch of them. He was like the best option for a whole lot of them. Or when we see 9.3 bosses somewhere, he's often one of the best options there. Or some of the 9.3 lanes, one of the best champions for like incursions whenever he's available to be used there. And time and time again, he kind of proves that his kit is this close to being an absolute offensive menace, but in a combination with like any attack modification, this guy's crazy good attacker too. And again, it's not just the invade meta, because not that long ago we had the stunning reflection, bleed and shock meta. It was very good offensively there too. And then we have another meta, and then we have another meta. And quite frequently, this guy's capable offensively, if not, again, absolutely busted. And then again, yeah, just kind of like the longevity, the relevance, the presence of the character, I don't think can really be denied. Because again, similar to, Domino has had 40 counters made for her effectively. Still a relevant champion, and she's still stable. Bullseye is kind of similar in that category. Because if you do not have a good counter against this guy, kind of done. Either way, obviously these ratings might and will change over time. We'll see how he ages, we'll see how Yelena ages, we'll see how Okoye ages. At the moment, I do think he has done enough to deserve a spot here. Spot number 1 just goes automatically back to Nick. I have said this so many times in the past. I think Nick is just OP. I think whoever made Nick, we all know who made Nick, but Mr. Broccoli, he just completely overdid it. He overtuned him. His stats are great. He is like one of the highest natural crit ratings in the game, for instance, and none of his stats are lacking. And besides that, there's like 50 billion pieces of utility in his kit for a skilled champion. Like he can prevent miss or evade very easily. Then he can purify the debuffs, and including dot debuffs, he can become permanently unblockable. And you can have massive furies and have access to passive bleeds, and obviously spam bleeds like your life depends on it. And it does a lot, obviously. However, the reason why he's still a top tech champion, top skill champion, is fairly simple. Obviously, he's defensively relevant. And again, I know that Juggernaut exists that nukes him fast. I know that Penny Parker exists, and Danny Moonstar if you want that, or other champions that can even now bypass his second life. I know that he gets counters. Every single champion in this game has counters. Fact of the matter remains, he's present, he's used, he's winning matches, but regardless of the meta, whoever invests in him, it's investment well made. And defensively, he will be putting in his work for time to come, in my opinion. Because having to effectively restart your fight midway through is always going to be a relevant obstacle or thing to worry about. And then, obviously his level 1 being extremely hard to dex, and then is unblockable that you have to play around, and all the things make the fight complex enough for that to be, defensively significant. The reason why I think he is still the first skill champion, because people have kind of woken up to how OP his second life mechanic really is. Because you can effectively use his first life however you see fit, and then just finish the fight off, whilst you are regening from that, and that safety net, that ability to do some most random things in the game is on perfect display in the game everywhere. Be that, value of him in Alliance Wars, easily can, save your death. Then be that anywhere else in the game with his easy, stable, reliable access to the bleeds. All of that stuff's great. Really, this is the party trick of the decade, really, for the champions. Still hardly any other champions that can completely purify all the status effects, buffs, debuffs, passives, everything from him. That's unique. And then that massive fury and that, full health that you have comes so much into play that he absolutely does things he's not meant to do. And granted, it's not always going to be the fastest because you do often involve like going a level 3, but still, if you can take a look around at the game, the most random things that you can do with Nick Fury. Like Attuma, sure, finish the fight taking no damage because you can regen that back. That's significant in my opinion. And then, dealing with also, like, I have seen Nick Fury take down Serpents, for instance. I have seen Nick Fury take down Bullseyes. Again, Bullseye is like one of his kind of like favorite second life tricks that you often use. Yeah, you can take damage fighting Bullseye if you're not bleed immune, but he can prevent evade, he can be more aggressive than most champions, and then, you let just Bullseye kill you and then use your level 3 to finish the fight. He does that in so many different situations against so many different champions. And again, he's kind of like the most random matchup champion in the game, or one of, anyways. And I genuinely do think he is the best skill champion in the game. I do think it's a very shitty thing that Kabami introduced him effectively via Hearts of Fire event, where, most of the people do not have access to him. But I think he's, again, as soon as he got released, immediately jumped back towards the top. He's in all the decks, he's in all the Alliance War maps, he's all over the place in the game. And rightfully so, because he's that powerful, that relevant. So there we go. The new top 10, in my opinion, is Nick Fury, Bullseye, Yelena, Crossbones, Okoye, Lumatrix, Mantis, Black Panther CW, Attuma, Korg, and Hitmonkey. Now, I'm going to start working on the tech video. See you soon. Bye-bye. Hello there, guys, and welcome back to the channel. So we have all the information about